Shira everyone, and welcome back to the WaterCooler Show. For our third episode, I get to sit down with a guy who is just appealing to every aspect of our nostalgia in the Myst community, Mr. Aaron Gwynaire, creator of Nia. Aaron was a delight to talk to, and I think you guys are going to be even more excited for this game after you listen to this than when you first sat down to tune in. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show. So, first question, what inspired you to make this, and how long have you been working on this project?
Well, I've been into game design since I was about sort of 14, 15. So, I've always been into that kind of thing from that age. And then with Nia, it came about a lot later on. It was 2018, July 2018. So nearly 4 years I've been working on this game. It came about mainly from wanting to change my sort of the direction I was going in creatively. I was really into music. I was performing, writing songs, recording, teaching music as well with my wife. That was in Australia, Western Australia. And it was going quite nicely until I sort of hit certain walls with that path that I was taking. And I had a few moments sort of between, I think it was 2014 to 2018 when I finally started there, where I was kind of going backwards and forwards between kind of game ideas, and that feeling of wanting to get back into game design was coming back, but music was always taking over. It was enjoyable. I loved performing and busking and recording music and songwriting and everything, so that was really cool. But when I finally sort of started Nia, it's been a project that I haven't really looked back from at all. It's just been a game that I'm continuously creating. And I think that's it's wonderful. All the other game projects I did when I was a bit younger, they sort of fizzled out, and then I came up with new ideas and I started that one. And I guess it's just an element of kind of like maturity, I suppose, but also passion and really wanting to see this world that I'm creating come to life. And I think that's one of the biggest drives and why I've been designing this game now for nearly 4 years.
Well, you could definitely tell there is a passion behind it because the visual aspect of this, it just draws you in the minute you see it.
I'm so glad that it has that effect, because I think one of the key things with creating Nia as well is the way I perceived my music, and my wife, really helped me with certain challenges I had when I was doing my music, is focusing too much on what other people want, what other people want to see and or hear in regards to music, I suppose. And there was an element of kind of focusing too much on what other people were doing and what other people wanted when I was with music. And I really, I preferred writing my own stuff, and I preferred doing that rather than covering songs and singing other people's songs. And it sort of felt like I was a human jukebox, and these pubs and everything, and people want to hear the songs they know. And I think that had a really kind of toxic effect, maybe just creatively. And I think with Nia, it was perfect because it was like, oh, wow, I'm coming back into what I was really supposed to be doing, what I was meant to be doing. There was this like blue journal I had when I was in my teens that I was filling out. And it's basically this book of all my ideas that I was going through. It basically catalogs it's like a time capsule of like when I was getting into game design, trying out different softwares and everything like that. And my wife read this, and it's like going into sort of my mind when I was like in my teens, and it just spoke out to her. And you can see that my real passions, what I was finding very fulfilling was game design, because I've always been an artist anyway. So I've always been drawing and creating clay models of things and painting and everything like that from a very early age. And game design was just the perfect way of being able to express that creativity and imagination through a completely different kind of like just a different way of doing things. But it can incorporate music, it can incorporate storytelling, which I really love as well. I've been a kind of storyteller from a very young age. I wrote I think it was 264 page fantasy book when I was about 11, and it was very inspired by Raymond E. Feist and Tolkien and everything like that. And computer games I was kind of playing at the time. Return to Krondor, a few other that was based on one of Raymond E. Feist's books, or I think vice versa. But yeah, it's just there's a whole world there, a whole story to tell. But it was great just getting into Nier 2018, and it's wonderful. It's just wonderful creating this world, and I'm so glad that it appeals to people in all sorts of ways as well, visually. People have different associations when they see the artwork. Like it's not just Myst and Riven. It seems to be other games that seem to be coming up as well, like Fallout 4, Final Fantasy, and a few other games as well that I've never really played. So that's pretty cool.
You've never played a Final Fantasy game?
No, I've never owned Final Fantasy, and I don't think I've never played it myself. I might have been, potentially when I was a bit younger, I might have had a mate who was playing it, and I kind of maybe watched him play it. But no, I've never really experienced Final Fantasy before. No, I'm very sort of set in my ways, I guess. And now and again, I might branch out, and I think that's what's happened with Myst and Riven, particularly Riven, is that it was that game that it really inspired me to get into game designer. So with Nier, it was kind of the perfect springboard of inspiration for that game. Yeah. I think because I'll be composing and producing Nier's music as well, that'll be one of the last things I'll be doing. And that's going to be a very fun experience just to kind of get back into the sort of studio recording, and creating the soundtrack, the musical score for Nier is going to be insane. It's going to be a wonderful moment. I mean, I've already kind of started testing ideas on a Yamaha keyboard that I'll be using, and creating kind of like a list of different sounds that I think will work really well for the game. But a lot of that will be kind of processed as well to come up with some very unique sounds that I think will work really well for the game. And that's going to be stuff that I'm really looking forward to sharing as well on Twitter and Patreon and Facebook, and it's going to be a new level of sort of design for the game. So I think music plays a big part, that's for sure. Yeah, definitely.
You said you were learning game design. Did you self-teach yourself, or did you take any kind of courses or get a degree or anything like that? Or was this more kind of just like a hobby type deal?
Yeah, so I got into game design, like I said, in my teens, and it was something that I never kind of really thought about at all before then. It was something I've taught myself. I've never been to university. I studied, in high school we took a thing, yeah, it would have been about when I was about 15, 16, we took a thing called GCSE. So it's like the end of year exams. And I took my chosen subjects were graphic design and music. And I got A's in, all three, because I really enjoyed them. And I think that's one of the key things is do what you love, and keep pushing for that, because you'll do well in it. You've got to have the passion for it too, just that inner passion, really right down at your core. I think with game design, it was just that the elements of being able to mix storytelling, art and design, music, all together. And for me, it was perfect. The slideshow style, screen to screen, of the original Myst and Riven. That was a perfect way of being able to portray what I wanted to sort of portray, the story, the artwork. Because the thing is, I'm not a programmer. I've tried programming and can't get my head around the whole scripting stuff. It just, I think I'm way too visually inclined to kind of look at a wall of script and really find any enjoyment in that either. And I've tried a few different, I think it was called Dark Basic back in my teens, and it was kind of like this, you could create these real-time games and stuff, but it didn't really appeal to me either. So I guess that was one of the reasons why I didn't really pursue it any further. So with programming, with Nier, for example, I use an engine called Visionaire Studio 5, and it's great because it takes the principles of programming and how you can make things interactive and certain conditions that work in certain areas, so that you are kind of changing things within the environment. And it does it in such a kind of visual way, like sort of visual scripting, I suppose. I've actually got a couple of devlogs on my YouTube channel now, because I'm starting to do these a lot more, maybe once or twice a week, where I sort of delve into the programs I'm using. And Visionaire is one of those programs that I've kind of delved into a few times now in my devlog. If you check them out, you'll be able to see kind of how Nia is kind of put together. So I guess in some way that was probably the more challenging part for me, because everything else was, I have everything else sorted. I've got a huge backstory for Nia, and I've got this, the characters that are there, and all the artwork is, that was thanks to Blender. I think there's a huge jump from using a software called Animator that I used in my teens, and kind of, even at the beginning, before I started working with Nia, I thought, I'll just use Animator again, because that was such a cool software, easy to use, and it was free as well. But there was a huge graphical kind of leap between what Animator could do and what Blender can do. And it was 2018, and I just thought, I'm going to try using Blender. I'm going to give it a go again, because I did try using it in my teens, and it was just way too complicated. I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, wow. And back then I had dial-up internet. And so those kind of, that access that we have nowadays is just, phenomenal compared to what kind of we had back in the day to learn any new software, which is why anyone could sort of get into these kind of things now. If you have a passion for it, there's so much there to learn and to access, communities to be able to, get into and be able to kind of discuss things with. So it's amazing. So I think Blender really helped with Nia, giving it that look as well, because it uses an engine called Cycles. It just has this amazing path traced quality to it. And I use, you can call it like a software, but it's more like an outlet for textures called polygon.com. And I think it's created by the guy, Blender Guru. Andrew Price is one of the best guys to go to if you're thinking about starting Blender. He has some amazing tutorials. You've probably heard of that, maybe the donut tutorial. And it's amazing what he does there. So I took that tutorial, and I learned the basics for Blender very quickly. Because I had a bit of a background in 3D modeling, it didn't take me very long to start creating things. And I think the vision for Nia came about very fast. It was that moment of seeing one of my test renders right in the beginning. And I might even share some of these very early renders to maybe even Twitter and Facebook today, actually. I might do that. Just very early basic SketchUps of a scene I don't even know what the scene really was. It was just kind of some models I put together. And then seeing those come to life without any textures. I remember seeing the lighting and the shadow and the shade of everything and the tone of everything, and thinking, wow, this actually looks like something from Riven. It had that same photorealism to it, but there was something else in it too. It's clicked. And I was like, wow, this is perfect. And then when I started really getting into it, kind of just, it just snowballed. And I think, that had a huge part to play.
How big is your game going to be? Are we talking like Riven size grand scale, or are we talking a little bit smaller scope?
We're talking about Riven.
Ooh, that's so exciting.
Big. It's a big world. And that comes down to a few things. Again, it comes down to just running with it, really following your passion. Now, there can be a few hurdles that you come across along the way. So I create Nia by myself. I'm a solo developer. Here and there, I've had assistants in Gwynaire, certain things, UI, mainly the UI stuff. And I've had a few. There's a guy called Zach McIntyre, who's a wonderful, great Blender user, and I met him in Australia. I think it was on one of the Blender Facebook groups, and he was just like, I'm based in Manjur as well. It's like, wow, that's so cool. And so we met up, and he came round, and he used to show me what he was doing, and I showed him stuff of Nia, and he had this amazing water shader. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And I had this particular water shader myself. And so that's basically kind of like a texture, but it's more than a texture. It's kind of like it has elements of like, how it reacts to light and all sorts of things. And we combine them together. And that's what creates the look of Nia's ocean. It's a combination of two kind of shaders there that are being used together. So I think it became one of the iconic kind of things that really appealed to people when they started seeing the Nia artwork, is that ocean, the way it looked. And with Nia, it's going to be a big world to explore. it was actually going to be a very small world in the beginning. Nier was actually going to be a test demo for another game that I was actually creating before Nier, and this was kind of around May, June 2018, and I was creating concept art for it, just sketches and stuff. This is when I actually started getting back into game development, and the game was called Beyond. I started really flowing with the story, the artwork. I was like, yeah, this is going to be really amazing. And then I think Blender came a bit later, and it was just that moment where I saw that the rendering engine bring to life this particular very basic untextured scene. I thought, wow, this is like I said, this looks like Riven. And I think it was that moment where I thought, I'm going to use this software. I'm going to use Blender now. And I started modeling this particular little scene. I thought this could be like the intro to Beyond. This could be the first little level that I could do, that I could release. And that didn't happen. It kind of just, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it became this huge thing. And it's taken on a life of its own now. And that's how Nier started. It was actually just a small little game, small little level that just took on its own life. So yeah, I think on scale, in terms of scale, I'll definitely say it's very similar to Riven. And I guess it in some way it plays very similarly too. Like it has an open world feeling, and I think that's what I love about Riven, is because it had that, in Myst and Myst Exile particularly, it had that hub feel. Like you had a hub world, and then everything branched off from that. And in some way, I'm not going to say too much, I think Nier is a combination of that and Riven, which is kind of cool. It wasn't really intentional, but now the more I've analyzed it, it has both. It has the feeling of both things combined together. And I think that's going to be really exciting for players as well. And I think it gives them that extra, just that uniqueness as well. Because although Nier has that Riven-esque Myst feel, I think there's going to be certain things that make it very unique, and maybe it kind of leans more towards the sci-fi. It's like the portals, that was actually in 2011. I'm kind of backtracking a bit here now. I came up with a game called Portals: Journey to the Lost Pearl Islands, and it was kind of what made me get back into game design in 2018, because I was able to go back into this backstory that I'd created and use that and then flesh it out more. And it was to do with portals. I think portals are something that really kind of appealed to me. And I've never been a Stargate fan or anything, funny enough. But I think being able to kind of go into these kind of portals and see what's on the other side. And it works in the same way with the Myst. I mean, what an amazing concept they created for Myst, right? Those books that you could literally open up, got a panel inside, and it's so unique because it works in so many ways. You read a book and you're engrossed in that story. You're in the world, right? This is like if it was a real thing, like if we could actually do this, you could go into that world and you could experience that world for real. And that's kind of what I think appealed to people so much, is that it had so many hooks. It had that, it had the book. You could open it up and you could go into that world. And the way it was delivered as well, it's just amazing. It was just an amazing experience and very unique for its time. And I guess with Nier, it does have the element of going into different places through the portals, but it's sort of a range of different portals within Nier as well. There's different kinds of portals, so player learns about those and what they're called. They all have different names. I am really careful how much I share. A lot of the stuff I share with Nier is visuals. That's all I do. It's just like, hey, this is what I'm working on at the moment. This is kind of like a place. I think now and again I might have mentioned what that particular place in that particular render might be, but it's kind of seldom, and I try and keep back from the story elements. And I think that's one of the key things. It's building up that intrigue, it's building up that mystery, and it works really nicely, because the exciting thing from my perspective is that there is so much you guys don't know, and that's wonderful. And I think it's very good to keep that stuff, a secret until you discover it. And I think, actually, I need to kind of talk about this a bit more, because the day and age we live in, it's wonderful that I've been able to build a community for Nier and build up that kind of fan base and the wish lists for Nier, like you said, with Steam and Facebook building up and Twitter now as well, more so. It's wonderful. But back in the day, like when I can't really remember it myself because I was quite young, but when Myst and Riven were coming out, there wasn't sort of social media. You had, I guess, magazines and stuff like that would maybe show snippets of the game before it was coming out. And I think that worked so well because you weren't able to kind of show so much of the game. It was a complete surprise. And the downside, I suppose, and I've done it fairly well, to kind of build the audience, you kind of need to show kind of what you're doing. And although I have shared certain scenes of the game, there was a lot I haven't shared. And I'm I've become a lot more, I think more so, I've become a lot more careful in how I approach that, because I have had people, kind of message just saying, I want this game to be a surprise still. And you're showing so much of the world that it might, sort of dilute that. And I've had to kind of stop from actually looking at my post because they don't want to see progress, because they want it to be a complete, a new experience. And I get that completely. So I'm a bit more kind of wary, I suppose, of what I do share. But then when I've created something, that artist sharey kind of vibe that's in me is like, oh my God, I need to share this. I'm really happy with this. I want to share this. But I'm actually becoming a bit more wary of and holding that back a bit more and being like, I'm not going to share this. I'm not going to. And if I do, it's going to be the basic form. It's going to be like maybe a screenshot from Blender without any textures. So there are ways of doing it. It's like a pendulum. You kind of want to be sort of, not too far on one side and not too far on the other, because the other side is where you are afraid to share your stuff. The kind of fear factor plays a massive part, and then it just kind of it closes opportunities for you. And I think it's very important to kind of just give it a go. If you're creating artwork or a game, you're designing a game, just share something of it and see how it goes, because you might be pleasantly surprised of the reaction. But then if you go too far the other way, you're sharing too much, and you're maybe kind of ruining it for other people too. And you kind of you have to kind of like find it like a midway.
All right, so he's self-taught. He's a musical composer. He's got a game that's going to rival the size of Riven, but you also now have a publisher.
Yeah.
How did that come about? I'm curious. Like, what did you feel you needed a publisher for this?
What's really cool just about this question that you're asking is that I can actually talk about it now. I was keeping it on a down low who the publisher was, because the game wasn't announced, you see. So with Microprose, keeping it quiet until the game was announced. And that took a while. But yeah, so basically I have been, promoting the game thus far until, what was it, about just over a week ago now, when the game was announced. I've been promoting it myself on social media. I haven't done any paid marketing. I haven't done anything like that. It's just basically mainly Facebook and Reddit now and again. Reddit works in a very different way, but I've had some successful wishlist boosts and people join on from Reddit, but it's different. It works in a different way. And Twitter now has started to steam. It's started to like create its own sort of snowball effect there, which is really good. So Microprose, they contacted me, which was really cool. I wasn't really looking for a publisher as such. I had an idea that maybe I might look for a publisher, and I had certain screenshots of posts that I'd done that I'd put up on Facebook that were doing really well. Lots of responses, comments of things and people really liking it. And I thought that'd be really cool to show to a publisher. That was, something I had a good kind of background there, support network as well. And I guess the game spoke for itself. You even said yourself, Ty, that the visuals kind of speak for themselves. It's like they lure you in. I think that's must have what appealed to the CEO, David, of Microprose. He'd been following the game for quite a while, and yeah, he saw something in Nier, and it had that Myst Riven feel that he felt like, in particularly in this style, that was very kind of, I guess, seldomly seen these days. You have a lot of point and click games out there. There's certain third person, broken sword, Monkey Island kind of style games. But this point and click or first person screen to screen, it's rarely done these days. There are people doing it, but there seems to be a lot of real time, a lot of Unreal Engine and Unity project. And that's the way that the business goes and the industry has gone. And people are more used to that, which is cool. But I think what's cool about Nier is it's peculiar. I think it's going to sort of stand on its own 2 feet in that way. So I think looking at it from a marketing perspective, it's very different. I think that will kind of serve Nier in a very good way.
Well, I may be completely biased here, but I have been arguing that we should return to this style of gaming for years. I have a buddy of mine who I occasionally argue with about these sorts of things. And it has always baffled me that past like 1999, I think the early 2000s is when we really started to phase away from this. No one has ever really tried to go back to point and click. And for exactly the reasons you say, it's such a unique style of gaming. And I've heard like the arguments of, oh, well, it's boring. It's not visually appealing. It's not action oriented. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're literally sitting in a world surrounded by aesthetic, appealing visuals, music, and the possibility of things popping out at you. How does that not appeal to the average gamer in this day and age?
Exactly right. And I think there's pros and cons. And I can speak from experience of obviously creating a world like this in this pre-rendered style. This is something I've learned. So the great thing is that with a game like this, I can actually include live action characters. So Nier will actually have real actors in the game, which is really cool. But one thing I will say is with actors, they can be, with a pre-rendered game, you can have live action characters in it. It's easier to implement because it's just replace the green screen. I've never actually done this kind of stuff fully before. I have tried it back in high school. I had a couple of sort of friends that I was creating this game, and I actually had scripts, and I had these friends that were, kind of learning the scripts and everything, and I wanted to put them in front of blue screens. We had these kind of big blue boards in the, I think it was the drama music department, but I never took it any further. I think I even recorded one of the sequences, but I never did anything with it. So even back then in high school, I was trying this stuff, and this is like 2006, 2007. But I'm now at a point where, the game has progressed so far that, this is definitely going to happen. And I'm working back in Western Australia, where I used to live. I'm going to be working with a guy who I used to work with music, do my music with. He's fantastic. I believe he goes by the name Scudley. It was Scudley Record. Yeah, it was when he was doing music. But I think it's Scudley Film now. And he's won some international awards for his stuff, and he's doing music videos. He's working with green screen. He's got some amazing stuff going on there. So I'm going to be, working with live action characters, and that's one of the benefits, I think, of pre-rendered. You can just, implement those scenes, and especially with Nier's realism as well. It's going to be fantastic blending real life people into the world. And that's what Riven did so well. Riven really did it, nailed it. For the time as well, they had so many challenges. If you watch the making of Riven, all those things, I look for all sorts of interviews and documentaries, playthroughs of the game, because it's exciting just to see people play the game and how they interpret the game as well. From a design developer's sort of perspective as well, which is quite cool. So that's one of the benefits. Pre-rendered is also you're using path trace, ray trace graphics. So the fidelity is going to be a bit higher than anything I think Unity or Unreal can actually achieve now. Unreal Engine 5 is big. What they're doing with Unreal Engine 5 is that's the engine that could push me into doing real time. I must admit, that is potentially the engine. Potentially. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that is what you're able to do in that engine. What I've seen is amazing. And I think, that's a big game changer. I think I'm very happy with the way I'm doing Nier. I'm very sort of set in my way of that. It had, when I started the game, I knew it was going to be first person point and click. And yeah, there was that element of like, people aren't used to this clicking around the environments anymore. They're used to real time. But at the same time, there's so many pros in the way that a point and click pre-rendered game can run, in the sense that the element of suspense can actually be a lot higher. If you're in an Unreal Engine, you are turning around, you're kind of moving. It takes you a little while to get to a certain point. If you're clicking and it's just sort of like a screen and you move really quick, like when you see, there's a nickname, people have given him a nickname. The guy at the beginning of Riven, is it Cho or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
And you look down later on, you just explore just outside, and you look down and you see his body laying there, just sort of at the water's edge. Well, you're not kind of just looking down slowly and seeing it. You're suddenly the screen moves up and you see it. So that snap kind of quality, I think, kind of creates more of an element of suspense. It's a very cool thing that can work for suspense. And with the pre-rendered aspect of it, though, with Nier, the look of it is very detailed. I love detail. I love richness, and that's what it's a very time-consuming kind of thing to do, especially because I'm creating these environments by myself. I'm kind of taking on the task of what maybe 100 or so people would be doing in a big development team, and I don't really care. And the weirdest thing is that a lot of people kind of would be overwhelmed, I suppose, by that idea, or be like, oh, that's a foolish thing to do. Why would you do that? And the thing is, for me, I guess it might be a foolish thing to do, but it just, my heart's at, sort of like my personal life and the shift from going from music to back to game design. Yeah. And I think that, particularly in the beginning, that was a big, it was a new adventure. And you know what, strangely enough, a lot of people, other game devs that I've heard their stories and stuff, they'll fall flat if they're kind of doing a project that takes them so long. They'll kind of lose motivation at some point. And I think the weirdest thing with Nier is that I've never really ever lost motivation for it, because I think it's the excitement of creating the world. And I think depending on what kind of game you're creating, we know, like me and you and the Myst community know what that feeling is of like when you go into into Myst or Riven or another world, and that feeling. And I think that's what drives me as well. It's very different to creating like a platformer game. For this kind of game, the main thing is the exploration. The actual programming elements, I use sort of quotations there in programming because it's not major programming. It's the visuals actually are the main form of the game. The exploration is the main form. And the puzzle elements, this is what Riven did so well, they come kind of after. The puzzles, they are formed from the backstory. They are formed from the environment that you've created, the characters. And, they then work a lot more naturally because they are part of the world. That's another thing. If you're talking about like scale and stuff, Nier is definitely on that Riven-esque path there. It's a game where you have to learn about the world. There's no kind of easy way out of it. You just have to, you have to learn about the world. You have to observe things around you. I think, it's a more fulfilling experience, not just for me as a developer, but from a player's perspective. They get to take more than just solving a password code puzzle. They actually learn the world, the history, and that's so cool. For me, that's just That's I think even compared to being a performer or writing a song, or there's so much more in that for me, from my perspective. That's more fulfilling to create that. And I think one of the downsides, I suppose, I was talking about pros and cons with pre-rendered. One of the downsides of it is the time. So there's a lot of time involved with rendering. I think when you're working with Unreal or Unity or like a real-time engine, you are able to see things happen quicker. The thing about a pre-rendered game, you have to kind of create the artwork. You have to render it. You have to create these images.
Have to let it bake.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm actually able to see things on the fly in some regard. With Blender, you can see things render in render preview mode, so you can actually kind of set the scene rendering, and you can move around and you can see what the textures look like, how the light works, and everything. There's no baking involved with Nier, apart from the fact that you're baking one massive image of what you see. In that sense, Nier is it's just a huge baked world. The render times are sometimes quite long, then sometimes they're not. It's not so much the fact that it takes a long time to render an image, because I have two very powerful computers that I use. One for mainly modeling and Visionaire stuff and all other things, and then the other computer is just rendering all the time, and that's like images, animations. So it's not so much the one frame or the one render that takes a while, it's all of the renders, it's all of the frames of animation, and that's a very time consuming thing. And so I guess that comes down to when you're creating a world, I guess it's all very well to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to create this massive world, but it's the technical side of things too that sort of come into things. So you kind of have to, what I've kind of learned along the way as I'm designing, because I'm still modeling the environments and everything, is to kind of work with what I've already done and taking assets that I've created and manipulating them. Because there's certain ways of kind of speeding things up as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of find shortcuts. You really do. Because when you start putting it all together in your head and you're like, whoa, okay, I still need to do this. I still need to do that. And, I am going to do it. I'm very stubborn in that way. I'm stubborn in a lot of ways, but I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to find the shortcuts to make it happen. So, for example, I might have terrain, because Nier is a mixture of all kinds of different models, very steampunky kind of stuff, kind of futuristic looking stuff, and there's terrain as well. So there's beaches and natural looking things. And if I've got a certain scene that has a particular kind of beach or a particular cliff, well, I've already used that. I can actually just take that from another set, bring it in, and just change the stones around, change the floor elements around, and it doesn't take very long. And already I've created a scene that looks very different. So that kind of stuff is great. The harder part is where you're creating something very unique, and it has to be unique. But it comes down to experience. I'm very fast in Blender. I work very quickly. So once you build up a flow, and you've got a fast computer, it helps. It really
it's
does
like
help.
Art in motion. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, you click, go, 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 go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the particular scene I'm creating at the moment, I was literally just doing it before we started this call. It's getting to a point now where I've nearly sort of finished it, but a lot of the elements were kind of unique. But another thing I can do is just bring elements from other scenes and use the textures I've used and manipulate those as well. So I can just use shaders that I've used before, and that speeds up the process a lot as well. It actually doesn't take also very long to get the images into Visionaire, because once I've created the template, the screen-to-screen mechanics, it's just a case of kind of like copying the flow of the nodes. So, for example, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D, you have 4 directions mainly that you can look in. I can then basically just take those and just replace the images. And it doesn't take very long. You've got a new position there that the player can move around in, and so forth. 2A, 3A, and it goes all. I think one of the scenes I'm rendering out now has 22 positions that the player can move around in that particular scene. There's going to be a lot of images in there. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of images and a lot of animations. So, but I guess that's one of the downsides. This the time it takes to render, and I think that might have been something that maybe kind of put off the industry, I suppose, in some way when they went to real time. It was probably a lot easier to get things done in a real time engine.
Yeah.
And time consuming, and when you've got a budget and you've got that kind of stuff to think about, yeah, it kind of makes sense why the industry went the real time route. But I'm in a position where the game is, it's there, and to get to that point and be like, wow, I'm actually going to be able to do this. I'm actually doing this. That's, in terms of pre-rendered and bringing back that style, that's very exciting. I think, it'll be received in a variety of different ways. And I think it'll be cool to maybe kind of show that kind of style to the younger generations as well that have never experienced that kind of first-person point-and-click style of gameplay. I was very lucky to have calls with Rand Miller, Eric Anderson, and Gamil, and Robin Miller as well. I've also spoken to Tim Larkin, who did the sound for Riven. So I've had these amazing opportunities from creating Neo as well, and they've really helped. They've helped me kind of create the game and develop the game in ways that I kind of didn't think about before. And they've been able to push Neo quite a lot. And one of the things I'm speaking to Robin about certain aspects of the development side is I think anyone can play a kind of point and click game. That's the cool thing about it. It's like all you have to do is click around the environment. You don't have to be like a gamer to play it. And you don't have to have a really high-end machine either to play Nier or a game like Nier, because the graphics are pre-rendered. You don't have to have a massive video card to play it. And I think that's a really cool thing. I think it will be very accessible in that way. And you don't have to learn loads of hotkeys. You don't have to learn any complicated mechanics. You can explore this world from the get-go just by clicking.
Exactly.
Clicking around. That's perfect. And I think that's why, you resonate with that yourself, even with saying like games should, they could take on this point and click system. There's no reason why not to. And I think that's maybe just the way I look at it. It's like, I think there's definitely still a market for that kind of game. And because it's so kind of old school, I think it's almost going to be kind of new in a way too, because it's refreshing in that sense. It's different.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I would be interested to see what the current generation of I hate being this old. The current generation of gamers will think of this, because for us, it's more like a nostalgia trip. For them, it's kind of right out of left field. It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it could catch on like wildfire. That's kind of what I would like to think. It's like, oh, this is very different, and I feel like game design in general kind of goes through seasons. Like I remember back in the early 2000s, we had all those open world sort of adventure titles like Jak and Daxter or Spyro, and then it sort of shifted into first-person shooters, and then we kind of had an RPG phase later on, and then it went, it varies from decade to decade. So maybe it's time that point and click came back.
That'd be cool. I think one thing to think about as well with the screen to screen and the sort of the peculiar nature of that in comparison to what's out there now. is the graphics. So the world itself, it has to be, like I said before, Nier is putting that at the foreground. It's the one of the foremost appealing things of the game. It's like one of the core things of the game. And I think even with the screen-to-screen navigation, the world itself will be intriguing enough to keep the player going. And once you learn the kind of basic kind of the camera angle, 90-degree turn, maybe 180-degree turns, right, with the mouse changing. Once you learn those kind of things of how you're turning around and moving around, it's that the game world will kind of pull you in enough that you kind of, that becomes invisible in a way. And that's going to be really cool. I think it's not going to be for everyone, but I think that's going to, for those that are on the kind of, on the bench about it, they're kind of like, oh, I'm not too sure about this. Well, with the world, I think the world will be enticing to pull people in, I think, definitely. And with the story elements as well. But like you said, nostalgia is a big thing with this game. It's the whole reason why I've kind of started the game in the first place. Nostalgia for that old Riven kind of style game. And I guess in some way it's almost like Myst 3, Myst 4, Myst 5 and Uru. They're all different in their own ways, but Riven had its own place. There was a particular look to Riven. I think it's still amazing today, and I think they had more of a team. They had I think a big budget for the game as well, especially for that time. They had massive, I think they were called SGI workstations, and they were able to make these amazing, I think, Jurassic Park software style stuff. It was the same stuff they were using for Jurassic Park back then. So it was, very expensive. It wasn't like open source Blender. I mean, what's incredible as well is that when I saw that first render in Blender, I was like, wow, this looks like something out of Riven. Well, this is using a software that I haven't paid anything for. And it's like, the power of technology, how it's evolved since then. That particular look had a lot of desaturation. It was kind of, that's what I love about Riven. It's that kind of worn, weathered, desaturated look that it has. Because I think that looks more real than anything that pops, anything that's vibrant. Because you look through your own eyes at the world around you, anything, this is kind of something that I've kind of picked up on fairly recently, actually, from a painter. It was on YouTube, that anything, when you're kind of painting anything that looks real, you're going more towards the grayscale. You have colors like yellow, greens, or blues, whatever it might be, and you kind of lean towards the gray scale a bit more. So when you have that more gray element, you have more of that desaturated look. This is something this spoke out to me from Riven. I was like, wow. I mean, graphically, it just looks amazing. Like you see the water there. You can see the tones in the metals. You can see the tones in the concrete and the stone. But they're desaturated. They're muted, slightly muted. And I just love that look. And that's something I've definitely incorporated into Nier. And it's just, for me, it kind of works to be able to bring over a realistic look. When I first started Nier, I was way too desaturated. I think I was running, this is before I started using Photoshop. And I think it's even it's on YouTube. It's the 2019 Spordocs test build that I did a playthrough of. So it's kind of no post-production on the images there, no post-processing or anything like that. And very brown, lots of brown. And I thought, okay, that's cool. And at the time was, it seemed to appeal to me. But what I started learning is that even though you can keep things desaturated, you can make things pop at the same time. And that's when Photoshop came along, and I started using that a lot more. And I think it was 2020 that Nier's kind of look really started taking a different turn, just slightly. it became the lighting popped more. And I take things like the yellows and stuff like that, and I actually desaturate those colors, so everything else can kind of keep its color. But when you start looking at sunlight and everything like that, you tone those yellows down. You can have this nice kind of white wash of light that looks a lot more natural than, say, like a light bulb or something that is an unnatural source of light. And so it's quite fun. And I guess when I'm working in interior sets, I can mess around more with the atmosphere of different lights of different colors. So I think it's going to be a nice kind of contrast there when the player is exploring the world. But I guess when you're talking about doing things differently with Nier, even though it's a pre-rendered game and it will run very similar to Riven, particularly because it'll have even transition settings as well, so you can actually move around the world with different transition settings or disabling them. But it has more transitions, FMV transitions, and that's an option that the player can have in the game, so you can actually disable this. And I'm sort of thinking, do I have this as a default setting when the player plays it or not? But so when you're moving around the world, you might come across a staircase, you might come across a ladder, you might come across a particular area that the player can move down or move up or move through even. Well, actually, what I'm having now is FMV sequences that actually play. So you're actually moving up the ladder. You're moving up the stairs.
Nice.
And they've been really fun to create. A lot of these animations currently are sort of in the OpenGL solid state mode from Blender, so basically untextured. It enables me to get them into the engine. It enables me to kind of see how they run. And but they've been really fun to see these kind of like being able to move around the world in those little instances, because although you're clicking screen to screen, when you have these little animations play, it suddenly feels like you're actually in the world a bit more. It feels like you're kind of experiencing the 3D feel of, because even though they're rendered images, all these rendered images have been created in a 3D world. So it's kind of bringing that 3D element to it, which is quite cool. And that's inspired more by games like, and you may have heard of them, and people listening may have heard of these games as well, because they're inspired by Myst. Dragon Lore 2, Heart of the Dragon Man, which came out in 1996 by Cryo, I think it was Cryo Interactive, and Schism as well.
Oh, Schism! Sorry.
They released Schism back in, I think it was the early 2000s. I'm only going by memory there, but I remember getting that in the boxed version when I was a kid, and I never finished it. I played a bit of it, but I remember, and these games took it a step further than what I'm doing, and I do wonder how, because the render times must have been incredible. But you, instead of clicking screen to screen, you're clicking and you're actually seeing yourself move forward, and then you turn around, you click left or right, and you actually turn. It's all pre-rendered, and it's really wonderful to see that, especially because it's not, this is like before kind of real time. I took became a big thing, I suppose, and stuff. But this that's another nostalgic thing for me, and I think from the get-go, I knew that I needed to kind of incorporate that kind of movement into the game. So yeah, that'll be something that the player will experience as well. So it's kind of taking something from another game, another source of inspiration, and kind of bringing it in to Nier as well.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I don't really have any other questions, except is there anything else you would like to say about Nier, or just to the community in general?
Yeah, I would love to thank the community that have sort of jumped on board with Nier and are really excited to want to play the game and experience the world. I think that's amazing. In the beginning, I just sort of created this world kind of for myself. It was really my own personal journey, and it's just wonderful to see other people resonating with that. So I want to thank the Myst community and Uru community as well for your wonderful support so far for others as well, or if you haven't done so, definitely wishlist the game on Steam. I'm also doing a lot of kind of dev announcements on there now as well, so a lot of updates. And follow the game, Defy Reality Entertainment on Facebook and Twitter @NearGame, and lots of updates on there. And I'm looking forward to sharing the rest of the journey with you guys. Excited to see where the journey goes.
And that, my friends, concludes our third episode. I would very much like to again thank Aaron for coming on to the WaterCooler show and sharing with us insights into what is clearly a forever passion-driven project. And I, like everyone else, look forward to playing your game, sir. Thank you, good luck, and until next time, my friends, Sharab Hashem Tea.